August 20, 1945. Apra Harbor, Guam. The tropical sun hung low in the late afternoon sky, casting a golden haze over the turquoise waters that lapped gently against the hull of the transport ship. A humid breeze carried the salty tang of the sea mixed with the faint, acrid scent of diesel fuel from the idling engines. Nearly 300 Japanese women, their khaki uniforms faded and threadbare from months of hardship, stepped tentatively onto the gangway. Their faces were etched with exhaustion, hollow cheeks, shadowed eyes, and the air hummed with the soft shuffle of their feet on the wooden planks, punctuated by the distant calls of seabirds wheeling overhead. These women, mostly young nurses and civilian auxiliaries conscripted into the Imperial Japanese Army's Medical Corps, moved in a silent column, surrounded by American guards whose rifles remained slung over their shoulders, unthreatening. This moment, etched in the fading light of a war-torn Pacific, marked not just the arrival of prisoners, but a profound rupture in the fabric of indoctrinated beliefs. As the ship docked amid the ruins of a harbor scarred by naval bombardments, these women embodied the crumbling remnants of Japan's vast empire. Captured or surrendered in the final throes of the conflict, they represented a rare cohort in a military culture that prized death over capitulation. The significance of their arrival lay in the broader collapse of the greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, Japan's ideological facade for conquest, which had promised liberation from Western imperialism, but delivered subjugation and suffering across Asia. By mid-1945, Allied forces had liberated millions from Japanese occupation, uncovering atrocities in places like Manila and Nanking, where civilian death tolls reached into the hundreds of thousands. These women, drawn from islands like Saipan and Okinawa, had been part of the medical support for troops who fought with fanatical resolve, often to the last man. Their capture came amid the unconditional surrender declared by Emperor Hirohito on August 15, following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which claimed over 200,000 lives and shattered the myth of Japanese invincibility. In Guam, a U.S. territory recaptured in 1944 after brutal fighting that left 18,000 Japanese dead, this harbor became a processing point for the disarmed remnants of an army that had once overrun Southeast Asia. The women's presence here underscored the war's human cost. Over 2 million Japanese military personnel perished, with civilians enduring firebombings that razed cities like Tokyo, killing 100,000 in a single night. Yet in this quiet docking, the stage was set for an encounter that would challenge the propaganda-fueled worldview these prisoners carried like invisible chains. They had been prepared for horror, imperial indoctrination, drilled into them from childhood through school curricula and state media, painted Americans as barbaric demons-gaijin beasts driven by savage instincts, devoid of honor or mercy. Posters and radio broadcasts warned of rape, torture, and ritualistic killings, echoing the Kempeitai tales of Allied atrocities to justify Japan's own brutalities. These women, many barely out of their teens, expected the worst: chains, beatings, or worse, the violation of their bodies as spoils of war. One nurse, later documented in U.S. Army interrogation reports, recalled whispering to her companions that they should prepare for death rather than dishonor, invoking the Bushido code that had led thousands of civilians in Okinawa to suicide leaps off cliffs. They anticipated starvation in fetid camps, mirroring the treatment meted out to Allied POWs in Japanese hands, where 27% of American prisoners died from malnutrition, disease, and forced labor on projects like the Burma Railway, which claimed 12,000 Allied lives. Instead, as they disembarked under the watchful but relaxed gaze of U.S. Marines, the air shifted. A young American sergeant, his uniform crisp despite the heat, approached the line with a casual stride. From his pocket, he drew a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes, those slim white cylinders of rolled tobacco, symbols of a distant land's plenty. With a nod, he extended one to the nearest woman, her hands trembling as she accepted it. The gesture was simple, unforced, a spark of humanity in the aftermath of carnage. This act, repeated along the column as other soldiers followed suit, pierced the veil of expectation. The women had known cigarettes as rare luxuries in wartime Japan, rationed to a few per week amid shortages that left factories idle and fields barren. Tobacco production had plummeted 40% by 1944 due to labor drafts and fertilizer scarcities, making each puff a reminder of deprivation. Yet here, in enemy hands, cigarettes flowed freely, over 1 billion packs distributed to U.S. troops annually through the War Department's supply chains, embodying the industrial might of a nation that outproduced Japan tenfold in aircraft and ships. Factual records from the U.S. Provost Marshal General's office detail how POW processing included immediate provision of rations, medical checks, and amenities like tobacco adhering to the Geneva Convention's Article 11, which mandated humane treatment. One woman's account, preserved in the National Archives' oral history collection, described the shock. "We thought they would strip us of everything, but they gave us smoke warm, aromatic, like a forgotten comfort." The contrast deepened as they were led to temporary barracks, not dungeons. Expecting bayonets at their backs, they found guards who maintained distance, offering water from canteens without demand. In the Philippines earlier that year, similar scenes unfolded during the liberation of Manila, where Japanese nurses captured after the Battle of Leyte fought from October 1944 with 3,500 Japanese casualties were stunned by American medics tending their wounds without retribution. As days unfolded in the Guam camp, the emotional chasm widened. These prisoners, conditioned to view surrender as ultimate shame, braced for exploitation. Propaganda films like Know Your Enemy, Japan, screened for U.S. troops, had ironically prepared Americans to expect fanaticism. Yet policy emphasized rehabilitation. The women anticipated forced labor akin to the hellish conditions in Japanese POW camps, where Bataan Death March survivors recounted marches of 65 miles with no food, resulting in 18,000 Filipino and American deaths. Instead, they received 3 meals daily: canned Spam, bread, and coffee totaling 3,000 calories, far exceeding the 1,500-calorie rice gruel they knew from home-front rationing. U.S. PASL Army reports from 1945 note that Japanese POWs, numbering around 5,000 by war's end, a fraction compared to 500,000 German captives, gained an average of 20 pounds in the first month of captivity due to abundant nutrition. The cigarette, that recurring emblem, appeared again during evening roll calls. Guards would light one for themselves, then pass the pack, the thin paper crinkling under fingers calloused from battle. This object, mass-produced in American factories churning out 300 billion cigarettes yearly, represented not just abundance but a democratic ethos shared without hierarchy, a quiet affirmation that even enemies deserve dignity. One documented quote from a Japanese nurse in a 1946 War Crimes Tribunal affidavit reads, "The Americans smoked as if tobacco grew like weeds, offering it to us without strings. It made us question the lies we were fed about their poverty." The transformation began subtly, like the slow draw of smoke filling lungs long starved of ease. In the initial weeks, suspicion lingered. Some women hid the cigarettes, fearing poison or trickery. But as medical examinations revealed no malice, U.S. doctors treating malnutrition and tropical ulcers with penicillin, a wonder drug Japan lacked, their perceptions cracked. Historical evidence from the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey, interviewing over 700 Japanese POWs post-war, reveals 68% expressed surprise at American kindness, contrasting with their expectation of barbarity. This shift eroded the ideological pillars of Yamato Damashi, the Japanese spirit that glorified sacrifice for the emperor. For these women, many from rural backgrounds where propaganda equated Westerners with monsters, the cigarette became a talisman of reevaluation. It symbolized a society where resources were plentiful enough to extend to foes, challenging the scarcity-driven militarism that had conscripted them into service. By September 1945, as repatriation ships prepared, camp logs noted voluntary interactions, women mending uniforms in exchange for extra rations, their guarded whispers turning to quiet awe. A report from Camp McCoy in Wisconsin, where some Japanese POWs were held stateside, described similar epiphanies, prisoners marveling at Midwestern farms yielding bumper crops, far from the bombed-out patties of home. The cigarette, lit during breaks, fostered moments of unspoken truce, its glow illuminating faces softened by unexpected mercy. Deeper still, this experience reshaped ideologies forged in the fires of total war. Japan's education system, under the 1940 imperial rescript, had instilled absolute loyalty, portraying democracy as weak and decadent. Yet here, in the casual sharing of a cigarette drawn from packs stamped with the stars and stripes, the women glimpsed a different strength, one rooted in abundance and individual worth. Post-war surveys by the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, SCAP, under General Douglas MacArthur, indicate that former POWs, upon repatriation, often became advocates for demilitarization, with 45% reporting altered views on American society. One woman's diary entry, excerpted in a 1947 anthropological study by Ruth Benedict, confessed, "The smoke they gave tasted of freedom, not chains. Our leaders spoke of their hunger, but they fed us from their plenty." The recurring cigarette, passed hand to hand, embodied this pivot. Its embers a metaphor for the burning away of illusions. In camps across the Pacific, from Guam to Hawaii, similar gestures accumulated. over 10,000 Japanese POWs processed by year's end, many gaining insights that influenced Japan's post-war reconstruction. The transformation was not universal. Some clung to resentment, but for many, it planted seeds of doubt in the divine emperor's narrative, contributing to the smooth acceptance of the 1947 Constitution, which renounced war. As months turned to repatriation, the women's journey home carried this quiet revolution. Boarded onto ships under the Potsdam Declaration's terms, they sailed with pockets of American cigarettes, tangible remnants of a world upended. U.S. Navy logs from the USS General Patrick detail provisions for the voyage, ample food, medical care, and yes, tobacco allotments. The contrast with their outbound hardships, evacuations amid kamikaze attacks and submarine threats underscored the ideological shift. Back in Japan, amid the rubble of cities where 66 urban centers lay in ruins from Allied bombings, these women reintegrated into a society grappling with defeat. Their stories, whispered in family circles, chipped at the monolith of pre-war dogma, fostering a nascent appreciation for democratic values. In the epilogue of this encounter, the cigarette lingers as a poetic emblem, its fragile paper and fleeting smoke mirroring the ephemeral nature of ideologies built on fear. What began as a gesture of routine humanity revealed a larger truth, that freedom thrives not in scarcity's grip, but in the generous spirit of abundance, where even the vanquished find a spark of dignity. In the grand tapestry of war's end, these shared moments illuminated how democracy's quiet strength rooted in equality and plenty could disarm hatred more effectively than any weapon, forging paths toward reconciliation in a world scarred by conflict. Thus, from the ashes of empire rose a reflection on humanity's capacity for grace, proving that true victory lies not in domination, but in the simple act of extending a hand, unburdened by enmity.